Hello everybody, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Nick.
And welcome to It Takes Two, a podcast where two people take two movies with the same plot or premise and watch and discuss them.
Yeah, we have to watch them first.
Yes.
So in this episode we watched The Silence and A Quiet Place, which are movies that came out pretty close together. A Quiet Place was in the cinemas, and The Silence I think was made directly for Netflix, Netflix exclusive.
Yeah, I believe that is correct. So, Quiet Place came out in 2018, The Silence came out in 2019.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a passover there. I don't know if the studio got a hold of it, or people had similar screenplays and were like, oh, I'm going to try this out.
The Silence actually started production first.
Oh, interesting.
And it's based on a book.
Oh.
So they probably are not happy that A Quiet Place came out while they were still in production.
And did really well. To the point where the main difference between these two movies is The Silence didn't get a sequel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't need a sequel because The Silence, like I said, was based on a book. So I assume it ended where the book ended. I haven't read the book, I will admit.
Yeah.
But I do know that it was based on a book.
So you get the two families that are surviving in this new world where you can't make a noise because of some undiscovered. It's confusing because can we talk about two? Can we mention two at all? Spoilers, by the way,
yeah.
everybody.
Spoilers for everything for the rest of the movie. We have both seen the sequel to A Quiet Place.
Yeah.
I think that we can't really take it into consideration when comparing them. Because as like twin movies, they were released A Quiet Place and The Silence. Obviously we can mention it because we have seen it. We do know a bit more background. I
was just going to mention the creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in The Silence, they're released from some underground cave in the States, and they appear out of nowhere in the first Quiet Place, but you find out sort of where they came from in two. But not really. It's not like, it's like as concrete as we dug a hole and they flew out of the hole. Yeah,
it's hinted at in one, because he's got all the newspaper clippings, and there's one that says meteor lands in Mexico, and another one saying multiple landing sites and things like that. Yeah. So we know that something has come from somewhere. It's whatever these are, they're not from Earth. Whereas in The Silence, they do a lot in that opening sequence to show how ancient they are. They're very much showing, these things were around millions of years ago, and then they were covered up by magma, and then it goes through, it does a flash forward through the whole of history from when they were covered up until modern day.
Yeah, the opening role for The Silence is interesting because it's just basically nature being nature, and then humans come along and frig everything up because there's lots of shots of pollution and dumping garbage and humans being jerks to the planet.
Yeah.
The two families both live with one child who both is a daughter who is deaf.
Yeah, so the eldest daughter in both families is a deaf girl.
Yeah, so they all know sign language, which helps them out surviving in this new world where you can't make any noises. Yeah. Which is a good premise.
Yeah, absolutely.
In The Silence, the daughter, I can't remember any of the names except Glenn from The Silence.
In The Silence?
Yeah.
I should know. I can't. I probably have written it down somewhere, but I don't remember exactly. I know I took down the names of all the characters in A Quiet Place because I always forget their names, so I took them down this time. Maybe I don't have the girl's name written down.
Anyway,
I know who she's played by, but that doesn't help. So it's Kiernan Shipka. No, that is how you pronounce her name, Kiernan Shipka. So
you get a daughter who goes deaf because of a car accident.
Yes.
Who looks like a discount Emma Watson.
She's like Netflix's darling at the moment. She's in so much Netflix stuff. She's Sabrina in their Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and she's in a Netflix Christmas movie that came out last year or the year before.
God, she's become the Hallmark.
Yeah, she's the Hallmark person of the Netflix
What did I say,
world.
Hallmark? So yes, trying to stay on where I was going with that. The beginning of The Silence starts off as a lot of the sort of early 2000s sort of zombie movies that were trying to follow in the wake of the high end era, which is it starts at the beginning. So it's like, oh, we don't know what's happening, we're watching the news, blah, blah, blah. Where The Quiet Place starts sort of day 90 after it's already happened. So it's already sort of, they've got skills to survive.
Yeah, it starts day 89 and then it skips, after the opening title, it skips to day 472. So it skips over a year.
Yeah.
But that is the first major difference that I wrote down, is that The Silence is very much an origin story.
Yeah.
Whereas A Quiet Place, you're already in the world.
Yeah.
From the get-go. You were already 3 months into what's happening.
The other thing is the major difference is the type of creature that they're hiding from. Obviously, they're both hunting via noise. So if you make a noise, it attracts the creatures.
They both use a little bit of echolocation. You can hear that they both make that kind of clicking sound and things.
It's a lot more obvious with the creatures in A Quiet Place. They're actually showing some form of anatomy. It's sort of only hinted at in The Silence because they have like a membrane that extends from the base of their skull near their neck, which sort of is their sensing organ.
I thought it was more obvious in The Silence because you hear the creatures before you see them.
Yeah.
When they dig through, when they're doing the mining and they dig through that hole and there's just darkness, you can hear echolocation, and they're very clearly based on bats.
There's even sort of like a hint towards that in the opening credits.
Yeah.
There's also showing of bats and then the CGI creature.
Yeah, so they're basically the main difference for me between the two creatures is that multiple differences. In The Silence, A, they can fly.
Yeah.
Which means they spread much quicker, and B, there's so many of them, and they swarm, and that's why they call them vesps, is what they call them, because they swarm like wasps.
For wasps.
Yeah. Whereas in A Quiet Place, obviously, there's much less of them, and they're land based.
Yeah, they mentioned that in this note board. There's
there's three in their area. Yeah.
The interesting thing that I found about the Silence creatures is you actually it shows how they're spreading so quickly, and it's because they lay eggs in people they've eaten.
Yeah.
And there's like a scene where they go into convenience store looking for drugs, which is obviously the same as the opening scene from
A Quiet Place.
A Quiet Place.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in those kind of movies.
Yeah. A lot of hunter-gathering, but like back to civilization, which is putting yourself at risk.
Yep.
Which is bigger. Obviously, it's the opening scene, and the family's guilty because the youngest boy, who's 4, gets killed in the opening scene, and obviously everyone's still harbouring guilt.
Yep.
400 odd days later.
Yeah, it's interesting because they all blame themselves.
Yeah, and then with The Silence, there's sort of we'll get into that later, but the main difference to me is obviously the family in A Quiet Place have got their shit together, real well.
Yes.
They're on a farm. They've got they're laying down sand, so when they walk in bare feet, it doesn't make noise. Where in The Quiet Place, they sort of just do the standard, suburban family thing, which is all pile in the soccer mum minivan and bail out of the city. Yeah,
well, they do. I mean, they're aware of things in the sense that they realise that living in a city is going to be bad for them.
Yeah.
City noise is going to attract the creatures, so they want to get out of the city. In A Quiet Place, I guess it's kind of hinted at that the family has survived for so long because they're not in an overpopulated area. So they do touch on it kind of in different ways. But one is people in the city leaving, and the other is people who were never in the city and therefore have survived.
The one sequence in The Silence which doesn't play up in the rest of the movie, which I found really jarring, is you get when the family's leaving the city, so everything's gone to crap. Everyone's told by the news to stay in their homes, which is obviously stupid.
Yeah.
You get a overarching scene of when they're driving away, and you see a big picture of the city, and it's all on fire, and there's jets and helicopters and stuff flying towards
and
there's
massive
a
huge
swarm of them. You get this weird sequence where they go underground to a subway car, which is obviously stopped and trapped, and there's a crying baby with a mum, and they instantly just like revert to mob mentality and try and throw the baby off the subway.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mum's like, no, I'll go too.
Yeah.
And then in the darkness, she drops the pacifier, the baby starts crying, and then they get ripped apart.
Yeah.
That has no relevance to the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I think they probably saw that as just like a sequence to show, you know, how society is dealing with it and how people are just going to throw each other under the bus.
Or out of the subway car.
Or out of the subway car.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, you're right, it doesn't ever come back to that because from then on it's the family, largely.
In comparison to the two families, you get the dad talks. There's a couple of dad talks in both of them, which I appreciated because it's like, I love Stanley Tucci and John. John does
Krasinski.
he does a fantastic job as the. I just love his shush motion. He does a really like he rubs his finger against his nose, and it's really like it's a real. I don't know if it's practiced or if it's just his idiom. I don't know. It's. Not normal to the other characters, so it's not like a universe thing.
Yeah.
It's not like, no, you did it wrong, you gotta like rub your finger against your nose to say shush.
It's just a personal thing, I guess.
There's no other, like, you get one tiny interactions, there's two tiny interactions with other survivors in A Quiet Place, which is one where they do sort of like a ritual of lighting fires so they know everybody else is out there.
Yeah.
So they're not alone.
So they can see people off in the distance also lighting fires.
And then you get the lady who's dead and then a guy when they're out there doing fishing and he like screams at the top of his lungs, I don't know, to commit suicide.
Yeah, that's what I took it as, is that he's, and you can see Lee, who's John Krasinski's character, is like really trying to plead with him not to do it. Because he can tell what he's about to do, because he's obviously grief-stricken and he doesn't want he doesn't want to live anymore, and at that moment is so tense.
Yeah.
And he just screams and the thing comes for him.
Yeah, it's a good sequence because it's showing that other people are just like not dealing as well as they are.
Yeah. And that's touched on in The Silence as well, because they find a couple that have done a murder-suicide. They've a couple that are lying together in the grass, and it looks like the girl has, I think, or one of them. So it's a heterosexual couple. The male has his throat slit, I believe, and the female has a gunshot wound through her chin. So either she slit his throat and then shot herself, or he shot her and then slit his own throat.
I did like the fact that he had like a note on his chest that just said "shh."
Yeah.
Yeah. So they everyone's sort of surviving. You get a little bit of like a you know. The weird home defense lady, who's like a crazy lady in her cabin, and that's where they get their first safe refuge.
Yeah, I mean, my big problem with that is because I don't think because we've seen both of these movies before, and we've watched them together before.
Yes.
I don't think I really thought about it too much the first time around. I thought the first time around I watched it, I thought, oh no, this woman doesn't realize that she's gonna cause sound, whatever. They do. They just straight up murder that woman and then take over her home.
Yeah.
They show up and they're like, they get that woman killed by the creatures and then they're like, sweet, now we own this house.
Yeah.
That's not great.
Yeah.
I do, that whole section though has one of my favourite things that happens in the whole movie, which I think is like the most clever thing they've done in the whole movie, which is when the creature starts attacking Miranda Otto, and then Stanley Tucci, to cause a bigger noise, to cause a distraction, which is a big theme in A Quiet Place too. He turns on a wood chipper and the creatures all fly into it and like splatter everywhere. I think it's fantastic. You should have just left that running. Just go around with a wood chipper and just kill them all.
Yeah. There's a lot of wood chippers used in movies for that purpose. I think the first time I ever saw a wood chipper getting used that way was Fargo.
Yeah.
Then,
I will tell you straight up, when I was going to write a note about it, I forgot what a wood chipper was called, and I literally looked up thing that guy gets killed in Fargo, and that's how I found out the word wood chipper.
So the other one is Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which is another fantastic.
That's hilarious. They use it so well.
Yeah. Getting back on track here, the sort of family dynamics are a little bit different because you've got in A Quiet Place you got John and is it Emily Blunt? I can't remember.
Yeah, Emily Blunt.
Emily Blunt is mom, pa, and then you've got the 3 kids, and then the 2 kids, and then the pregnancy that's happening.
Yeah.
With the other one, you've got Ma, Pa,
Grandma.
Uncle Glenn in the beginning,
Uncle
who's
Glenn.
not a blood relation, it's just Stanley's best friend.
Oh, is he? I didn't even cop that.
Yeah,
I
they
thought
had
he
that
just
big
was their uncle.
conversation where he's like, I was in high school and I was getting beaten up because I was a nerd, and he came over and
Oh.
headbutted somebody, and that came back sort of at the end fight sequence, I felt.
Right, okay.
Where he just was just like, no, I'm going to be a man now, and like, just headbutted that dude. Anyway, in the silence you get this weird, so they go to the convenience store and they find this weird cult.
Yes.
And
the Hushed,
and it's super creepy. The note I wrote down here, which was hilarious at the time, is because at the end that he's all like trying to plead with them and being all really nice, but being like, please join us, and they're like, no, we're all good, and then they turn and walk away, and then he pokes his like burnt off tongue out.
Yeah.
And my response was too many sour lollies tongue.
Yeah, I think they cut off their tongues. I think what they did, the Hushed. That's really interesting.
Little girl in the. So there's a few mistakes that both the families make that annoy me.
Both families.
Both families make that annoy me. In the silence. Obviously the cult know where they are.
Yes, so they follow them or something.
Yeah, but it's not really explained in the movie. They just like appear and they're like, "Give us a girl." The
cult are so creepy. So the guy from the cult first sees Stanley Tucci and the daughter when they have gone to the convenience store to try and get, or to a pharmacy or something to try and get antibiotics because the mother, Miranda Otto's leg has been injured in that scene I was talking about before where she gets attacked. And he stops them and he's trying to get them to join his cult of the Hushed, which are people who are totally silent because they've cut out their tongues. And then the girl signs to her dad, saying something like he's creepy or something along those lines. And the guy, seeing that she knows sign language, he's communicating using written notes on a little booklet.
Which I will point out, I made a note of no one writes small.
Yeah, they all just write big.
They take up for one sentence. They take up the entire page with a vivid, and it's like paper is a finite resource, guys. Like, be sparing. Your whiteboard, like most people, like you can buy tiny little whiteboard. You could find tiny little whiteboards.
Yeah. Well, this guy is a reverend, and he's the leader of this cult, and he writes down when he sees a girl signing something. He writes down, and from the Lord comes deliverance. So from that moment, it's creepy, but you think he's going to want to use her to like teach them all sign language or to create a new whatever. But then when they show up at the house, what he writes in the notebook is the girl is fertile.
Yeah, which is super creepy.
Oh, creepy. But the reason they're writing big, we know the reason they're writing big, story-wise. Yeah. Well, I mean, like outside, film-wise, is so that the people inside the house can also read it. Yeah. From a distance. Whether he's intending for them to read it, I don't know. Yeah.
The note that I've got down there is creepy sex cult. It's been less than a week. Calm down, bro.
Yeah, that is the thing. I mean, if they were in a position like The Quiet Place where it's been a few months, it would make sense. But the fact that they've got that cult in days is quite scary.
Yeah, look at my sun-dried tomato tongue is another one of those notes that I wrote down.
You're just roasting this one guy.
He just pokes it out at them. The other interactions you get with people in the Quiet Place is just the guy who's given up. And I think from a point of view of you talking about a year later and they're in a rural area, it makes a lot more sense. But just that they could have just locked, because the cabin they steal has a giant gate around it.
In the silence,
has a giant fence around it with a gate on it that has kettlebells on it.
Yes.
So just close the gate when they turn up at their place.
I think the idea is they leave the gate open because once they've opened it once, they don't want to set off those kettlebells.
Yeah, but if you're getting cult members turning up at your place being like, give us your daughter, we want to have sex with her. Wouldn't you just go close the friggin' gate?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because the really cool trap that they make later...
Yeah, the cult are like so good at this already. They figure shit out better than the family have.
Yeah. What is it? They use a whole bunch of phones duct taped to the windows and a girl who's got phones duct taped to her with all the same alarm
It's
on it.
great. So they duct tape phones to the windows with alarms set on them so that they can set off these alarms. The creatures will hear them and will smash through the windows for them so they can just get in.
Yeah.
They also send a girl, knowing that these people are going to be sympathetic towards her, they send a girl who's acting like they've cut out her tongue without her permission and all this, but underneath her jacket she's strapped on phones so they can set off alarms or call or whatever so that, more noise.
Yeah, it's a really good attack.
Yeah.
Really smart from a point of view of like how do you attract sound without being in that area.
Yeah. How do they get so many phones though? But I guess there's a lot of dead people around, so just take
so
phones.
in the quiet place they use what are they, kitchen timers as a distraction?
Yes, she's the
is
kitchen timer.
Very similar.
Yeah.
Obviously you kind of have to be quite close to that. You can't set it for like an hour and then go set it up. Well, I guess you could, but I guess that's more of a short term.
Yeah.
And they're obviously cheaper and a lot more easy to get a hold of.
Yeah.
You'd be able to go into a store and buy a whole bunch of, or just, loot a whole bunch of kitchen timers versus getting a whole bunch of phones and then obviously unlocking them. Maybe they were the cult's phones. Who knows?
Yeah.
Or just using dead people's thumbs to,
Yeah.
to open them.
Could have done that.
Yeah. The grandmother's sacrifice I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
So they've got the girl and she just runs out and grabs a hold of these cult members and just screams at the top of her lungs, and obviously the Vesps just maul them. To me, they're like flying piranhas rather than,
Yeah, so they're based on bats, but they're very much, I'd say flying piranhas is a good description of them. But yeah, so that's, there's a lot of parallels, I think, between The Silence and A Good Place. No, A Good Place. A Quiet Place. The Silence and A Quiet Place. And one of which is that sacrifice scene, because obviously, again, spoilers. I know it's all been spoilers, but...
Yeah, whole thing.
Yeah.
Basically, this podcast is spoilers.
But to the end of A Quiet Place, John Krasinski sacrifices himself.
In a very similar way.
Yeah, and it's so that the kids can escape. He screams so the creature comes for him, and in The Silence the grandmother runs out after the girl when she's being carried away with these cultists, and she managed to get the cultists off her, but they're obviously going to fight her off, so she just is holding on to 3 of them at once and just screams so that these things will come and get all 4 of them.
Yeah. The fight sequence at the end where they fight the cult's pretty cool. Like, it's just like, I love how like...
It's just a whole family ganging up to murder someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've all just got their own little implements. Because he's carrying like a sickle around at one point.
Yeah.
But yeah, just he gives his younger son a spear that he's made by like whittling down a broomstick, and his son runs up and just like stabs a dude.
Yeah.
Which is pretty brutal for a kid. The youngest surviving boy in The Quiet Place annoyed me in both movies because his just personality type is I'm terrified all the time. I
actually wrote down a note that I think that child actor is great at being terrified.
Yeah.
He's so good at playing fear, but the amount of, like, if you try to think about, he's like, he's 8 or 9 or something?
Yeah.
If you try to think of being an 8-year-old living in this situation, especially living in it for over a year and having seen your younger brother just murdered in front of your face, like the sheer amount of just post-traumatic stress disorder you're going to have as...
Because he seems to have the most fear about making noise.
Yes.
Even when his dad's like, no, it's safe. He's like, no, we're going to go.
Yeah, he's so jumpy. Like, because he's had his formative years in total silence.
Yeah. So
to him, hearing a noise is just instantly activates this terror response because he knows what's coming.
There's a few little setups that I really like in A Quiet Place. The loose nail when she's doing the...
Yeah, which I have written down as Chekhov's nails.
So did I! which was a fantastic because it's just such a brutal, and it gives me chills every time I've seen it, and I've seen that sequence like 4 times now. Just the nail sliding into Emily Blunt's spot, and then her just being like, ah!
And the thing is that, like, you have that anticipation from the moment you see the nail come up, but even the first time you see it, you know what's going to happen. Because it's all set up that they're walking around bare feet all the time, because that's how they stay quiet. So you know that she's going to come back down that stairs and she's going to step on that nail from the second it goes up. And it's so good. But that almost brings me to my overarching thing that I want to say about both films, is that while they have a very similar premise, the huge difference between them is that The Silence tells us everything, where A Quiet Place shows us everything.
Yeah, I would agree.
So The Silence, starts off with a narrative. It starts off with a narration by the girl, and it ends with a narration by the girl. Whereas A Quiet Place, I actually paused it to check the timestamp. 38 minutes in is the first time there's spoken dialogue. So the first 38 minutes of a film, totally silent. There's like, diegetic noise and some music, because they didn't want us to have just totally silent film. I feel like that would really put some people off.
Yeah, what?
But
this modern age.
Yeah, but it's literally 38 minutes in before you get any person saying a sentence out loud.
The major difference, obviously, is the creatures. And I think the Vesps annoy me just in the... I don't know, it's just... There's something about a creature that makes a hell... Because they're supposed to be scary, so they make like a screeching noise.
Yeah.
But wouldn't... If a creature that attacks other things based on sound, and you just have a whole bunch of them screeching, wouldn't there be just some form of crossover there?
I don't know. I'm just thinking about the fact that I learned a while back about bats, which is that people assumed that bats must have really great echolocation, and the reason they screech and stuff is so that they don't fly into each other, and then they did like high-speed videos of bats and they're all just flying into each other all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm just imagining the vesps all just like screeching and slamming into each other. But it could be that they're trying to indicate to each other where they are.
Yeah.
Because if they can't see, they need to have that audible thing to know where the other parts of the swarm are. Maybe. Yeah.
I think in A Quiet Place they use the girl's disability as like the major plot point. Yeah. Where John's been working on is it character's name Lee?
Lee. Yeah.
Lee's been working on like trying to fix her implant.
Yeah.
And it ends up creating like a weapon that can defeat the
creatures. So this is a huge thing. Because a significant portion of the notes I've taken down for A Quiet Place are just facts that I found out afterwards. And one of the things, I don't know where the note is, but I remember reading it. It's because she doesn't have a hearing aid, she has the cochlear implant.
Yeah.
Those work based on electromagnetic waves.
Yeah.
So they don't make a sound and they wouldn't have a feedback loop. So the only reason that her particular implant makes a sound is because of the modifications he's been doing with hearing aids to try and get it to work. So he has made a one-of-a-kind device, which is also why obviously this isn't just, a thing that's known around the world that hearing aids will do this, because hearing aids won't do it and cochlear implants won't do it. It's some weird thing that he's done that creates it. It's just everything about the film it just feels so well researched and so well planned.
Yeah, I think because he was the writer and the director, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he was presented with a script, I think, originally, or like a premise. It was supposed to be, apparently, which I didn't know until I was researching this. It was originally intended to be a part of the Cloverfield franchise.
Oh, interesting. They do look like tiny little Cloverfields.
Yeah, it was going to have crossover with 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Interesting.
And then when they had the finished script and the finished, stuff, they brought it back to Paramount, and Paramount said, actually, we can see this as a totally separate film. Yeah. And they were all really relieved because they wanted to have their own film, to do their own thing.
Yeah, I thoroughly like Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane. Cloverfield Paradox annoyed me because I won't talk about that right now, but...
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. I've seen 10 Cloverfield Lane was the first one I saw, and I really liked it.
That's fantastic. Such a great movie.
Yeah, the the original draft of this was obviously intended to be in the same universe as 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is very interesting.
Any sort of any final statements?
Oh, are you finishing up already?
Yeah, because we went way too long last time.
Oh, we're only at 30 minutes at the moment, so we're still good. Yeah, I'm just going to go into more of this. I'm just going to go through the notes that I have about things that I thought were very well researched.
Yeah.
One of which is
in a Quiet Place.
In a Quiet Place.
Yeah.
So one of which was the birth scene.
Yeah.
So it would be really unusual for a baby to go as long as that baby does without crying after birth, except if it can be explained by problem with the birth, such as blood loss, which is why they have that scene where she's, in the bathtub and there's the blood coming out.
Yeah.
Which is apparently an indication that the placenta has been damaged or has prematurely separated from the mother's body. It creates blood loss from the mother and from the baby. It explains why she loses consciousness. It explains why the baby doesn't cry. And then it also gives the dramatic tension of the birth being early and John Krasinski coming in and seeing the tub full of blood and thinking that she's been killed. So it's like all of these things add up, and it's because they've gone and researched this medical condition that could cause the baby to not cry.
That's great.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's so good. So it's like just... And the other thing was that the fireworks, so they used the fireworks to mask the sound of the birth.
Yeah.
And
There's such a good scene where the fireworks explode and she just
screams. Oh, it's so good. But this is at day 473 of the invasion, which they have on the calendar marked as October 3rd, which means that day 1 of the invasion was June 17th, which is 2 weeks before the 4th of July, which is why they have fireworks.
Oh, clever.
So they literally set it up so that there was a reason that they would have had fireworks in their yard. That obviously they didn't set off that 4th of July because, apparently that bathtub scene, by the way, this is just a fun fact, this isn't a research thing, but apparently it was done in one take, the whole bathtub scene, and as soon as John Krasinski said cut, Emily Blunt immediately fell out of character and asked the crew what everyone was having for lunch. Which just makes me like her more. I think she's just very charismatic. I think that whole cast is fantastic.
Yeah, they did a really good job.
So you've got I took down all the actors' names as well. So obviously Emily Blunt as Evelyn, John Krasinski as Lee, Millicent Simmons as Regan, Noah Jupe as Marcus, and then I also included Cade Woodward as Beau, even though Beau dies very early on in the movie. Yeah. But every single one of them is fantastic. Yeah. They're so good.
I think in The Silence they didn't scrape the bottom barrel. I just find whoever the actress was that plays the daughter just like a real discount looking Emma Watson. She has like the same facial. Yeah, she has the same facial structure, which probably makes sense why Netflix are just like, well, we own you now. Let's make everything with you.
So I haven't watched their Sabrina show, but I've heard it's quite good. So I think she's just been really good in that. So they've cast her in other things that they own. Miranda Otto obviously is the mother. I love Miranda Otto. She's
Stanley.
Yes, well, we know from episode 1 of the show that I love Stanley Tucci because I talked about him a lot in a film that he wasn't in. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Stanley Tucci. I think he's a great actor. And I think he's very charismatic.
Can you find out from Netflix how much they don't make money, do they? That's the confusing part. We do a comparison of how much money they make.
That's the thing, that I don't think you'd have the same kind of budget and well, I mean, obviously you can find out the budget, but I don't think you'd have the same kind of box office thing if it never went to cinemas. Yeah,
it's going to be an interesting formula for the coming future because of more people making just for streaming platforms. It's going to be very difficult to say, oh well, that movie did really well. It made $1 billion.
Well, I think that's why Disney Plus are doing what they're doing with their pay extra to preview this thing. No. Yeah, but I mean, they're obviously trying to get around that problem in their head in terms of
so you're paying for a service and then you have to pay extra to watch something like a couple of months before. It's just like, I don't know. The reason I own a streaming service is I don't have to pay extra to go see stuff. Yeah. So I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah. I think...
Because didn't it fail with Milan?
I'm not sure, honestly. But I think The Silence would be a much more popular film if A Quiet Place hadn't come out a year beforehand.
True.
Because obviously, like I said, it's based on a book. It was in production in 2017. And then just A Quiet Place just came out of nowhere and
wrecked it.
Though I do always wonder, you know, what the family conversations are like, because obviously Stanley Tucci is married to Emily Blunt's sister in real life. So, you know, do they talk about this at all? Who knows?
Well, in the one where I had to be quiet, we did this. Well, in the one that I had to be quiet, we did that.
I do think, because I mean, I feel like, you know, there's so many parallels that A Quiet Place does them better every time.
Yeah.
Because there's the, you know, eldest daughter with a hearing disability, and the one in The Silence still talks all the time. She does like a video call.
So I wanted to sort of gloss over that. There's a few. Okay, so you talked about all the good things. I'm going to talk about the bad things for just a second. I don't care where you go in the world. I don't care if you're in South Korea, Japan. Nobody has FaceTime that has no drops, especially during the freaking apocalypse.
Yeah.
And that pissed me off. There's nothing that drops. No frames, no skips, no pauses, no audio breaks. It's just perfect dialogue, and it's one of those things that just annoys me because they're so easy. Because there's a lot of movies that came out recently about like hauntings via the internet and like death.com and that sort of thing, and they've got videos and it has the old technology. You're not going to have an iPad in the apocalypse with one bar and get perfect signal.
Yeah, especially since they do touch on that as well, because Stanley Tucci tries to make a phone call and there's no signal.
Yeah, but yet they
Miranda Otto, I think, tries to make the phone call.
They can make a Facebook conversation over FaceTime and it's perfect. Like,
what annoys me about it is they literally, I think twice or maybe 3 times in the film, say, put all your phones on silent and no phone calls, no whatever. And she keeps having these phone calls with this guy, these video calls with this guy.
Even though they both know he's learning sign language because he's got a crush on her. Yeah,
but she has these video calls where she has the volume up so you can hear stuff happening in the background, and he's signing to her, but she just speaks out loud to him. She doesn't ever use sign language. I don't understand that. I think in A Quiet Place, every single character is hyper aware of every sound.
Noise, yeah.
And I think also the crew and the sound design is based on that, because they have it's almost totally silent, and every time there is a diegetic noise, it's like amplified, so that we hear that fire that lights up when they knock something over, and you know, everything is loud, whereas in The Silence it's just normal levels.
Yeah, the mixing is different.
Yeah, and they're making noise all the time, and they're whispering, and they're talking, and they're...
Yeah. Everyone has to be quiet. No one talk. No one can have a conversation out in the open. It's like, no, this is dumb. Like, in the quiet place, in the silent place, in the quiet place, they have subtitles for the signing.
Now, that is an interesting fact, because apparently originally they didn't. Because they thought that audiences would be able to pick up on everything from context and from the expressions and from everything. And they found there was one scene where that wasn't true, and because of that one scene, they had to subtitle that scene, and then because of that, they had to subtitle the rest of it. And that scene is where, near the beginning, when Lee and Regan are having an argument over the implant, and he's trying to give her the new one, and she's saying it won't work, and he's saying, please just try, whatever. That just didn't come across without being able to understand what they were saying. And because of that scene, the rest of it's subtitled. But they figured every other scene in that movie, they think you should be able to understand without knowing sign language.
Makes sense. I think it's good because as one of those people who loves and hates the general populace's ideal of the perfect movie, and why movies like anything made by Michael Bay keeps getting made, most people are dum-dums and want to just go watch movie because they're dumb movie.
Yeah, I definitely. Well, I mean, okay, if we're gonna go into wrapping up, I think they're both good movies. I don't like
the go to the refuge. Where is it? Up north. Where?
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah, The Silence has a lot of problems. But I think those problems are highlighted by the fact that A Quiet Place exists, and A Quiet Place does everything better. I think without A Quiet Place existing, The Silence would be would be a pretty decent movie. And
it would stand out as a Netflix sort of like Annihilation and
Bird Box.
Bird Box.
It's very Bird Box.
Yeah.
It's very The Mist is what I thought watching the second time, because the first time I'd seen it I hadn't seen The Mist yet.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a lot of parallels, I think, to The Mist.
God, I love that movie.
But yeah, so it is, I think it's a decent movie, but I think A Quiet Place does everything better, and I think half of that is the fact that they show you things, they don't tell you things.
Yeah.
Everything is shown.
I do appreciate that from a movie point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not treating us as stupid.
Yeah.
They don't need to tell us at all.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's been us then, I guess.
For this episode?
For this episode. We will... Yeah, we chose the amount of H's in the episode title based on the shh that the cult leader writes on his notebook when he's telling them to be quiet. Alright, so our socials. You can find us on Facebook at It Takes Two Pod, and on Instagram and Twitter at It Takes Two _pod.
Even though, because Facebook don't allow underscores. Thanks, Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook don't allow underscores, but that's fine.
Dear.
Okay, anything else you want to say about it before we wrap up?
No, until next time.
Okay, thank you for listening.